Hey everyone, this is Anoop Kumar. Let me know if the audio and video are coming through. Good to see you all. This is episode 14 of Is This a Dream? So we're getting started a little bit late today. We'll have a short session. Let me know if you can hear me in the chat box. All right, I see some people from Facebook. Loud and crystal clear. Demetrius from London, hello, good to see you. Shireen. Great. Just wait for a few more people to jump on. All right, Ranjana from YouTube, good to see you. Periscope, MJ, okay, great. Episode 14. I think we're on 14 now. Oh, you're right. It says 13 there, huh? Let me see if I can change this. Okay, there we go. I updated it. Thank you. All right. Good to see you too. So let's start with a quick moment. We can all calibrate. Just relax and take a few deep breaths. All right. So this is the book, Is This a Dream? Right? So a lot of people have asked, well, how can this be a dream? All the things that are happening today. So remember, this is a question. It's not coming through clearly. It's a question, is this a dream? Meant for reflection. All right? So here's the first question. The first question is, if consciousness is primary, can we say that the three minds are not three different things at all? Are they just three different ways of perceiving or knowing of the same experience? Is all experience just shining in the pure knowing? All right. So if consciousness is primary, can we say the three minds are not three different things? Are they just three different ways of perceiving? Okay. So if consciousness is primary, so this is our hypothesis here, is that what we consider to be physicality and mental thoughts are in fact differentiated experiences of a fundamental consciousness that is beyond individual identity. Right? So if that's the case, can we say that three minds are not three different things? Well, if consciousness is fundamental, and if we're saying that the world, as it were, is as though made out of consciousness, we could say, just like when there is a dream, although there appears to be physicality and all kinds of events and time and space in the dream, we know on waking up from the dream that it was that consciousness itself which appeared as matter. Right? If this is the case, then the question is, how many things are there in the world? Right? How many categories of things are there in the world? Or how many categories can divide up the world into? And you'll see that when we ask this question, that the number of categories or the ways in which we divide the world depend on the lens that we choose. Right? So if I'm a physicist, I might say, well, there's dark matter, there's dark energy, and then there's matter as we know it, right? There's the atomic world. So I can create three categories, right? Or if I'm another kind of person using another lens, I might say, well, there are living things and there are non-living things. So there are only two real things in the world. There's living and non-living. The other person say there are only three things: dark matter, dark energy, and atoms. Right? Another person will say, well, there's the spiritual world, there's the supernatural world, and there is the natural world. Right? Another person will say where there's matter, and then there's energy, and then there's consciousness. Right? So the point is that how many things there are in the world is a matter of perspective. Right? Obviously, there are infinite numbers of things that we could name in the world. There's no end. But the kinds of categories that we create and we say, this is real, matter is real, and then mind is real and consciousness, or atoms are real and dark energy is real, right? The things that we reify, the word for this is reifying, where we have a certain experience and then we crystallize it in our minds and say, this is real. So the things that we say are real depend on the lens we are choosing. So in this question, when we say, can we say the three minds are not three different things at all? Are they just three different ways or perceiving of knowing of the same experience? Well, even before we get to that, can we say the mind is real in itself as opposed to consciousness? Right? Or let's even go back. Can we even say consciousness is real? We're using this word consciousness, which has so many layers, so many levels of understanding, right? My consciousness, your consciousness, sleeping, waking, animal consciousness, broad consciousness, spiritual consciousness, cosmic consciousness, so many kinds of consciousness, right? But how do we decide what is real? It is simply by a choice that we are making based on our experience. So here, when we talk about the three minds, this is a choice that I made. When I looked at the range of experiences, including the scientific explanations, the spiritual explanations, the philosophical explanations, my own experience, the shifting senses of identity, what seemed to be one of the most fundamental realities, and I say that carefully, one of the most fundamental realities is these three configurations of mind. Right? Which can be said to be, as you said, three different ways or perceiving of knowing. Three different ways of perceiving and knowing, because in each mind, the way of perceiving and way of knowing is different. As the first mind, the way of perceiving is through the five senses: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin. Right? That is how we perceive. As the second mind, we talked about this a few classes ago. As the second mind, the way of perceiving goes beyond these five senses, because these five senses themselves are functions, not anatomical parts. They're functions of the second mind. So yes, it's a different way of perceiving, a different way of knowing. As the second mind, knowing is not restricted to thought. Knowing is not only by thought, not only by emotion. Right? And as the third mind, there's no distinction between perceiving, knowing, being. So as you said, in each of these three conditions of the mind, or as I call them, configurations of the mind, right? Perceiving and knowing is different. Is it perceiving and knowing of the same experience? Well, what is that fundamental experience? Right? I'm going to call it consciousness here. Fundamental nature, the fundamental existence is consciousness itself. As it takes various configurations. Why do we call it configurations? I say that because the mind seems to be split as the first mind. As the first mind, the mind feels to be within the body or near the body, and it feels not to be out there. That is a configuration. It is not that there is no mind out there. It is simply that the configuration is such that it is only detected in a localized way within or near the body. Right? So asking the question again, can we say the three minds are not three different things at all? Sure, we can say that. Yeah. The reason that I've labeled as three configurations of the mind is so that the first mind can recognize, wait a second, there's much more to what I am than this first mind. There is another configuration. And by detailing that, describing that as much as possible, giving as many examples as possible, that first mind can start to recognize more and more of itself as the second mind and beyond. So, yeah, someone said things are countless at the same time, everything is an illusion. Things are certainly countless. There are innumerable things, right? As the first mind, there are innumerable distinct things, right? Because as the identity is perceived as localized, this infinite sea of awareness itself is perceived as an infinite number of localized things, which at the level of physics might be particles, it might be fields. At the macro level, it might be objects like a bed, a table, a tree, a body. But I wouldn't say that this is an illusion, as somebody has said, and it is popular to say that in spirituality, that this is all an illusion, right? I would choose different words because it is not so much that it is an illusion. What does this mean in Vedanta when we say that this is Maya? That's a phrase that's often translated as illusion, right? But Maya is that which comes and goes, right? You know, like a swing. You sit on a swing, it comes and goes, right? If you were looking straight like this, and let's say the swing was going like this, and you could only see in this axis, you would see the swing coming and going, swing coming and going, right? And so what the idea of Maya suggests is not necessarily illusion, but what we see is not independently real. It is constantly coming and going. And it's not independent of the observer, right? Any object that you can see in front of you started at some point. It was created at some point. It was built at some point. And at some point, it'll go away, even if it's after our lifetimes. It has a beginning and an end. And it can only be recognized in certain states of mind. If your state of mind shifts, you might not recognize the object. So the objects of the world are considered to always be coming and going, right? Meaning they have no independent reality in and of themselves. That which lends substantiveness and a foundation to these objects is the underlying consciousness, right? So it is not enough to just say, yes, this is an illusion, right? That's why the title of the book, again, the title is not, this is a dream. The title is this a dream? So as to inquire and look more closely at the nature of the world and nature of ourselves, and use that to take whatever actions we need to. Smith says, I was wondering what was the point of being aware of the three conscious, or of the three minds, maybe. So we've covered this in some of the previous talks. To quickly summarize, when there is an awareness of the different configurations of the mind and the different viewpoints, then there's simply a fuller experience of life, a fuller experience of what we are, a fuller experience of what the world is, a fuller experience of the big picture, where we've come from, where we're going, right? And when this fuller experience is not there, there is a film of tension. There's always a film of tension, Tension, right? Because of this not knowing of where have I come from, where am I going, what is the nature of this? There will always be questions, but having the bigger picture, having the full picture, helps to recognize more and more of oneself, and that gives a feeling of satisfaction. And it brings, in a very practical sense, it brings much more resources into one's awareness or into one's toolbox in terms of managing life and dealing with the world. And furthermore, recognizing these different configurations have very real applications in the fields of the world, in medicine, right? In medicine, I'm trying to translate this as second mind medicine. You can check out the website secondmindmedicine.com, which is a way of trying to translate this three minds perspective into what it might mean for healthcare. It has the same potency in physics, the same potency in mathematics, the same potency in sociology, in every field of life. This has applications. So this is the benefit of this. All right. And the final question of that same, there were three questions together. So is all experience shining in the pure knowing of it? It is this underlying consciousness that shines as the world of experience, right? It is not so much that there is a person that knows consciousness. It is consciousness itself, which is personing, so to speak, personalizing, particularizing as all the particulars of the cosmos. And in this light, which self-modifies as the world of experience, we recognize ourselves as individuals, as human beings, as communities, as a world in which we can take action and create change. Right? So this is the second mind perspective, that this consciousness that I am is also expressing as this personality, this body, this world, right? As though there's a speaker and a listener sharing ideas, right? Creating the world, co-creating the world in this way. All right. So I see more questions. Keep writing the questions and we will get to them probably in the next session. But for now, let's keep going. We have a few more minutes here. Is duality implicit in manifestation? And where there is manifestation, is there separation? Yes, when we talk about manifesting, or I'm going to use a different word here, in creating or in anything being manifest, right? When I talk about manifesting here, I don't mean it in the sense that a person is creating things out of thin air. That's not the sense in which I mean manifesting, but simply something is manifest, something is apparent. So when something is apparent or manifest, is duality implicit? And is there separation? Yes, to some extent there has to be. Because to even recognize a thing as distinct, right? To recognize, for example, these words are distinct. Each word has a meaning. When we put the words side by side, adjacent to each other, create a train of words, the sentence has a meaning, right? So for there to be any distinct understanding, there has to be some level of duality, multiplicity, separation, right? Separation has become almost like a bad word, right? That we can't say. Almost as if, because of the way spirituality has been trending, it's almost like we can't talk about separation or separation is bad, right? That kind of speak is a response to the feeling of disconnectedness, right? But in and of itself, unity and diversity, togetherness and separation are two sides of the same coin. So to create something, yes, there has to be a feeling that there is this thing that I'm creating in addition to myself or as an extension of myself. So to that extent, yes, there is always going to be an implicit duality, an implicit multiplicity, right? Just as there is an implicit unity. They're both there. The implicit unity is what allows the implicit diversity, right? Like the unity of the palm allows the diversity of the fingers. right? But the diversity of the fingers implies the unity of the palm, right? So similarly here, when there is manifestation, yes, there is implicit multiplicity. All right, so someone says, does chanting help in understanding our consciousness? Let's take a pause here. So shift the attention beyond the images, beyond the words, the sounds, and shift the attention to the awareness. Does chanting help in understanding our consciousness? So the mechanism of chanting is a couple things. One is that when we say something over and over, then it has the effect of having the mind stay in one groove, as opposed to saying many different things, many different topics, moving from one to the other. By chanting, we take something specific and it stays in that one groove. And what that does is it collects the rays of the mind. Right? The mind is an incredibly potent instrument. And when its rays are divergent, even with divergent rays, we can do so much. It may be inefficient, but we can still do so much. But when we do one thing, right, whether it's chanting or anything else, in this case, chanting, we do that one thing and we repeat it, it collects the rays of the mind and it brings them into focus, right? And it's a physical activity because the mouth is moving, lips are moving, tongue is moving. It can also be a mental activity if we're thinking about the meaning of that. And so this attention gets focused. That's one way. Eventually, it is this focus of the mind that begins to recognize the deeper layers of the human being, the deeper layers of the world, right? The divergent mind with divergent rays cannot recognize the deeper layers of the world and the human being, right? It's a different kind of intelligence. So many times in schools, the kinds of intelligence that are valued are learning many, many different things, like memorizing or how to do this, A, B, C, D, E, F. That's one kind of intelligence, and that can be done with a relatively divergent attention. Right? Some convergence is needed, but relative divergence, it can still do that. But to recognize the deeper nature of something, that mind has to converge and be steady. Right? From jumping from one to the other, the mind's gaze gets distracted and shifted so much that it never penetrates deeper into what is here. Right? So chanting helps to bring that mind, make it steady by not jumping around and focused so that the mind's vision can deepen. Right? That's one thing. And the other thing is with certain kinds of chanting, the very sounds that are made or the vibrations that are made allow the mind to sink to deeper levels, sink in a good sense, to drop into deeper and deeper levels of recognition. You can see this with everyday language, not just chanting, right? Certain sounds are considered soft, right? Like the sound s, s, and f, and l. So S, F, L, these are considered soft sounds. Even the word soft is s, f. Only the t is a hard sound in the word soft. Soft, right? If you look at characters' names, I remember, I don't know if it was Romeo and Juliet. I don't remember which play it was, but there's a character Benvolio, right? And he's depicted as a soft character. Well, look at the sounds in his names. Benvolio. They're very soft sounds. And then there's another person named Tybalt, who's kind of a rigid character, Tybalt. The point is that the sounds we make themselves carry effects. Even if we don't understand the conceptual meaning, the sounds we make have effects. The word Om in Sanskrit, why is Om chanted? It's a very open sound, like a beginning. And even when it closes, it's not a hard sound. It closes with the opening, meaning the sound. When you create another opening after it's once again ma, right? So it's right? So even if we don't understand the meaning, the very sound has an effect. So the same is true for chanting. In particular language, especially in Sanskrit, the words that are chanted, even if there's no understanding of the meaning, even if the mind is active in certain ways, the particular sounds that are made themselves will have an effect on the human system, such that it will open up deeper levels of recognition, right? We may not recognize it opening up, that's different. Because to recognize something, many times you need some kind of framework to say, oh, wait a second, this happened, I recognize it. Otherwise, what happens is something opens up and we say, okay, that was weird, right? Okay, that doesn't make sense, or something like that. So chanting works in these different ways. It converges the rays of the mind. It can bring the mind to contemplate on a particular meaning, and the sounds that it makes has effects on the human system. All right. We'll do one more question. Or let me continue these questions next time. I want to read another paragraph from here, from Is This a Dream? And it's on page 26. It says, religion talks about the afterlife. Spirituality talks about immortality. Philosophy talks about the meaning of life. Science investigates how we can extend our lives. Why the obsession with living longer, living forever, or transcending birth and death altogether? Right? Ever thought about this? It doesn't matter what kind of mind you have or what interest you have. Whatever field or kind of mind, whether it's a scientific mind, religious, spiritual, philosophical, practical, there's so much interest in this life and extending this life or figuring out this life or why is this? The interest in longer life, heaven, immortality, and supernatural states stems from the deep recognition every human being has that there's more to the picture than this 4D world. Right? So every human being deep has this recognition that this 4D world, right? 3 dimensions of space and the dimension of time, that there's more than this 4D world. We might not say it, we might not verbalize or conceptualize it, but every human being has some feeling. It may be at a pre-verbal level that this is there. And that's how it expresses through fields of inquiry that we label, depending on our minds and our barriers and our definition. We call it philosophy, spirituality, mysticism, religion, right? Practical inquiry, self-inquiry. So there is this deep recognition that each of us has, that what we are and what this world is fundamentally more than the stories we are commonly told. So next week, we will take this a little bit deeper. We'll finish these questions and maybe wrap up this chapter, right? Where does consciousness go when we die? We'll wrap this up and move on to the next one. If you have questions, please do ask them. and we will talk about them more next time.